Okay, so tonight we're going to continue our discussion of happiness and how our practice might influence or have an impact on it. But before we do that, I just want to recap on our discussion last week and just to remind ourselves of the main points. So we talked quite a lot about how money might impact our level of happiness. So if you're struggling financially, then having more money does make your life better and happier. But once you have, and this is all in the science and the research, once you've achieved a certain amount of financial security, then more and more of it is not going to bring you the increasing levels of happiness that you expect. The relationship between having more money and happiness really does level off. It goes, like that, then it just flattens out, flatlines with increasing amounts of money. So like in Malaysia, if you are in the B40 group, that's what they call the bottom 40% of income levels, then as you increase your income and you move into the M40, which is the mid 40%, or even the top 20%, the T20s, then you will feel definitely a improvement in your well-being and happiness, because you don't have to worry about paying the rent or the mortgage or your kids' education or the car, the house, all these kind of food and clothing. But if you are in the top 20 or the top 10%, even doubling your income is not going to increase your happiness by much. In fact, it's unlikely to increase it by much at all. And that's what they found in the United States, where they did a lot of research into this. So what a lot of people also don't realize, that being super rich, something that many people aspire to, also brings with it a lot of issues and a lot of problems. One of it is guilt about being so rich but not feeling any happier. And then there's a lot of issues regarding security and wondering if your friends are your friends because they really like you as a person, or they just like your money. So there's a lot of things associated with that. So, but we don't kind of think of it when we think about, I love to be rich. So that's what we talked about last week. And also, there is an idea that we have that happiness is somewhere that we will be if or when. So I'll be happy when ... or I'll be happy if ... But what we've found out is actually that belief does not actually hold up over time. So this week we're going to talk about can happiness or levels of happiness last, or why can't they last? So sometimes things happen to us which makes us very happy, like the birth of our first child, or being offered a dream job, or getting married. So can we maintain that heightened level of happiness over the long term? So before we can really appreciate or understand that, there are two things we need to understand about how our mind works, to see if we can see if we can actually live happily ever after. So one of the really amazing things about us as human beings is that we are able to kind of simulate the future in our minds. And that's because of our very advanced brain, this front part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex. No other animal has it. Dogs can't simulate the future. They can't kind of think, if my master gives me a steak, I'll be so happy. They can't. They literally cannot do that. But we can. We can think, if I ate that, if I get to eat some Mao Shan Wang durian, I'll be so happy, you know. We can almost literally taste the durian. And so we can imagine this. And we can imagine what it's like to win the lottery, or how happy would we be if we get a dream car or dream job, etc. But what we don't realize is that this kind of future forecasting, this imagination in our mind, is actually a very, very kind of quick sketch. We don't actually do it very well. It's not very detailed. And because it is a quick sketch, it leaves out a lot of details. It's like watching a 2-minute movie trailer with only the interesting scenes and very little else. And that's because this part of our brain that does it is very new at the job, if you can think of it that way, and it doesn't do it very well. So we skip over a lot of these details. So maybe you've heard some friends tell you, getting together with him or her wasn't like how I imagined it would be. You know, even maybe you've even had the experience yourself where you thought that if you got into a relationship with someone, it would be kind of like unicorns and rainbows. But then when you do actually get together, it's not quite as great as that. So that's because of our poor ability to kind of forecast the future. So maybe you have a beautiful image in your head about getting married to a dream partner, and then you live and you think, well, we'll both live happily ever after in our dream house that we will buy together. Then you actually get married to this person, and then the reality is not really like what you thought it might be. You think, well, you know, we'll wake up every morning, you know, in each other's arms, and we'll have breakfast together. And then it turns out that the reality is maybe you have to cook breakfast every day. And then he doesn't even help, not even with the cleanup. And then often he'll make a mess in the house and doesn't help with any of the housework. So that's not what you imagined, but how come? That's because we can't kind of play out every detail in our head. So last week I talked about passing my professional exams, and I didn't feel as kind of ecstatically happy as I thought I would be. And that's part of the reason. Also, a long time ago, when my long-term girlfriend at university dumped me, ended the relationship, I was not as devastated as I thought I would be. You know, I thought, wow, this might be the end of the world. But actually, it didn't take a very long time to get over it. So it turns out that the good things won't be as good as you think they'll be, and also the converse is true. The bad things won't be as bad as you think they'll be either. In other words, we overestimate how happy we'll be, and we also overestimate how unhappy we'll be in response to a future event. So this is the first thing to remember. We're not very good at predicting our happiness or unhappiness. And this is all supported by the science. Students at Yale University, when they did a study of them, they weren't as happy as they forecast when they got the grades they wanted. And also, when they didn't get the grades that they wanted, they weren't as unhappy as they thought they would be. Lovers predict that they will take a long time to get over a breakup. But the research shows that actually they bounce back a lot quicker than they expected. Now, this is a true story, and it's about a guy called J.R. Martinez. And he's the only son of an El Salvadorian migrant mother. After 9/11 events, he felt that he wanted to join the army, the US Army, as a way of kind of showing his gratitude for the country that allowed him to stay. And 2 months after he finished his basic training in 2013, he found himself in Iraq driving a Humvee on a mission. The Humvee's front wheel hit an IED, and the blast threw his fellow soldiers out of the vehicle, but he wasn't so lucky. He was trapped inside by straps, and the vehicle became a fireball. And he was conscious throughout the whole thing, and he remembered like screaming as he watched his skin start to melt in the flames. And his fellow soldiers, dug him out, but that took about 5 minutes. So by the time they got him out, he was very, very badly burnt. So he was medevaced back to the US, where he was put into an induced coma for 3 weeks so that he could survive. He had third-degree burns over more than 40% of his body. It was actually pretty terrible. When he woke, the doctors told him, they gave him to him straight. He said he would never be able to eat, walk, or go to the toilet again without any help. And then the biggest blow to him was that they told him he could not stay in the army anymore. So next 3 years he spent in the hospital, going through more than 20 or 30 operations to graft his skin and everything. It was excruciating. He said the most painful thing for a burn victim, I don't know if you know this, but is to have a shower. And why is that? Because when we take a shower, it's very nice. If you have a warm shower, it's even nicer. But this skin is a protective layer. When you don't have any skin, your skin's been burnt off, all your nerve endings are exposed, and anything that hits on it causes you immense pain. So he said, you could take toughest guy, and if he was a burn victim, and you put him into a shower, because they had to shower them to get them clean and make sure they were not catching any infections. You could hear their screams down the corridor. They were yelling so loudly because it was so painful. So he had to go through a lot of physical pain. But on top of the physical pain, he also had to endure a lot of emotional pain. So JR, when he was a young boy and into his teens, he was a very good-looking boy. All the women, his aunts, the older women, always used to say, he's very cute, he's very cute, he's very cute. So that's all they said to him. So then he just realized that, I'm a cute guy. Even when he was in his teens and when he joined the army before he got burnt, the main thing, his kind of identity, if you want to think of it that way, was that he was a cute, good-looking guy. But then when he was eventually allowed to look into the mirror at himself, which was some time down the road, he couldn't recognize the face that was staring back at him. It was, he didn't know who that was. And then he became very, very downhearted, became very angry, depressed. it was actually a very, very dark time in his life. So he managed to get through it. And what does he say now about all those events that caused him so much pain and suffering? And these are his words. I can tell you right now, what happened to me was a blessing. Yeah, you heard it right. He said, a blessing. He said that he was incredibly fortunate, as other soldiers in the situations of these IED explosions lost their arms and legs, and he still had his limbs. And he saw this being able to survive through the event as a second chance at life, and he wanted to make the most of it. And being an injured vet also opened many doors for him. He was able to train himself to walk again, to do things for himself, and he went through a lot of reconstructive surgery to reconstruct his face. And he became a mentor to other injured vets, a motivational speaker. And then, because of his work, a TV series offered him a job as an actor, and he became an actor on daytime TV. And then things kind of took off from there, and he even took part in this competition called Dancing with the Stars. I haven't seen it, but I guess some of you have. And he was a winner on it. He won. So then the person who was interviewing him, Dr. Laurie Santos of Yale University, asked him if he would change anything if he could. The explosion, the burns, the pain, the suffering they went through. And he said, I wouldn't change anything. And I 100% mean that. I made a good life, have a beautiful wife and beautiful daughter. I am blessed. So again, he says, I am blessed. That's kind of really amazing. I think most of us imagine that if we were burnt beyond recognition, we would be devastated. I think maybe we would think, life would not be worth living anymore. But yet, JR said, I'm blessed. So what is it about it that we can learn from his experience? So the important thing, I think, is that from his example, from his experience, and actually also from the experience of many people who have suffered devastating events or injuries, is that we have this amazing ability to recover. We are actually more resilient than we actually think we are. So, even being blown up, such a terrible thing as being blown up and getting burned over more than 40% of his body, JR was still able to say, I'm blessed, because I have all these great things going for me right now. So we are more resilient and we can adapt. So that's the important thing to remember, that we actually are able to adapt to shitty things which happen to us, and we can get used to it. So when bad things happen, they don't last. They are not permanent. We adapt to them, and then we get on with our lives. So the old saying that time is greatest healer is true. So also, when good things happen to us, we also get used to it. So many people have this idea, and it's a bit of a misconception, that happiness is a place that if they could get to it, then they could build a house there and live in it forever. But the truth is, it's more like a vacation place where you go to for a visit, but then you have to come back to your usual place. So that actually kind of is a reflection on the Buddhist teaching of impermanence, that actually nothing is permanent, nothing lasts permanently. It's whether it's happiness, sadness, or unhappiness, everything is always changing. So you will not be permanently happy, and neither will you be permanently unhappy. So that's a very, very good thing to know. So also sometimes when something really good happens to us and the happiness feelings doesn't last, we think, oh, something's gone wrong. Like for example, someone you love tells you they love you very deeply and forever. And then you feel really happy, like it's like, you know, we both love each other so much and so forth. Then what you notice that over time, you don't have the same levels of happiness anymore. You know, things start to go back to like normal. And you think, oh, something must be wrong. You know, something must be wrong with me, or maybe something's wrong with them, or something's wrong with our relationship. But actually what we don't realize is that it is totally normal for this to happen. That whenever we get a boost in our happiness, or we get a dip and we feel unhappy, after some time we will return back to our kind of set point, you know, our baseline set point. So if we realize this, then it's easier to deal with and to accept that we realize that, you know, these spikes in happiness aren't forever. But the important thing to realize is that we can actually improve the level, our baseline set level. I think in the first week we discussed that, you know, we kind of inherit a basic set point for happiness, and it's roughly 50%. That means on average, you know, we have that level of 50% of people will inherit a certain level of happiness. Whether it's little, you're happier or you're less happy, you know, that's where you are. That's what you're born with. Then our circumstances, if we change our circumstances, you know, we get more money, we have a nicer house, we have a better lifestyle, that doesn't have much of an impact. It's roughly about 10%. Then the rest of it, the 40%, is actually our intentional activity. What we actually do in our lives to practice those things which can help us have a greater sense of well-being and happiness. So next week we will start to explore that. And you know, there's not much you can do with your baseline levels of happiness. It's there. It's kind of like a genetic predisposition. But there is a lot you can do to kind of activate, perhaps, your happiness levels. And so, coming back to this thing about marriage, the interesting thing is that when you actually get married, the research shows that you get a boost in happiness, and that lasts for about 2 years. Okay, so don't tell people who are just about to get married that. So by the end of 2 years, you come back down to your baseline happiness set level. And then hopefully by then you have discovered lots of wonderful things about each other that will more than compensate for this kind of return to baseline levels. And then you can take your relationship further than that. So to wrap up, the two key takeaways for tonight are: one, we overestimate how happy we'll be, and also overestimate how unhappy we'll be in response to some future imagined event. Basically, we suck at forecasting our happiness and unhappiness. And secondly, we get used to things and situations, regardless of whether it's a good situation, good thing, or a bad thing. And after some time, we come back to our baseline happiness set points. So if you want the kind of like the nerdy jargon, it's called hedonic adaptation. That's what the scientists call it, hedonic adaptation. So finally, this question we started off with: can we live happily ever after? So the noted psychologist, Professor Daniel Gilbert of Harvard, replied, yes, you can, if you have about 3 minutes left to live. So that's our talk for tonight. Please like us and share us, because it'll help a lot. And I'd like to thank you for your practice and for watching. And do join us next time. And do stay safe. And well, in the meantime, thank you and good night.